The final girl theory. She survived because she did not participate in lascivious behavior. Distressed, dirty, bathed in blood, but alive stands the final girl or sole survivor of the common slasher film. What would have been an amazing time in high school, a road trip to Texas, or even summer camp has now ended in nothing but teenage massacre. In the horror film genre, the slasher film is often thought to be nothing but unrefined pornographic violence filled with cheesy dialogue and stereotypical storylines and characters. One central theme throughout the common slasher film is the final girl. The final girl figure that is so ingrained in the slasher film can be originally traced to film scholar Carol J. Clover in her 1987 journal article, Her Body, Himself, Gender in the Slasher Film, where she argues that the final girl in the common slasher film is the one who encounters the mutilated and broken bloody bodies of her friends and is victim of brutal violence at the hands of a deranged killer. She suffers, but at the end, she fights back enough to be rescued or even kill the villain. In other words, the final girl theory states that in the slasher film universe, the last standing survivor is the female character who fought her way through gory violence, psychological torture, and endless suffering. The final girl theory may sound simple and straightforward. I mean, all she has to do is survive, right? The reality is that the final girl theory has over time evolved into a trope or figure that stands for more than survival skills. As the slasher film has continued to evolve, so has that final girl trope. The genre has now become a platform or a medium for society to explore gender and societal roles imposed by a patriarchal society. The slasher film punishes, with extreme violence, those who dare partake in antisocial behaviors. And by those behaviors, I mean sex, drugs, and alcohol. Professors of psychology and gender studies from Canada, Dana Menard, Angela Weaver, and Christine Cabrera, claim in their journal article there are certain rules that one must abide by, predictors of morality in slasher films. The primary characters were more likely to survive a slasher film if they wore neutral conservative clothing, fought back against the antagonist, embodied an androgynous gender role that only works for 1990s, and are engaged in a greater variety of prosocial behaviors. Primary characters were more likely to die if they appear fully or partially nude and or engaged in a greater variety of antisocial behaviors. We see the final girl trope realized in popular slasher films of the 70s, 80s, and the 90s. These final girls go through hell and back in order to survive a mass killer with a thirst for blood and mayhem, but not before following the slasher film survivor rules, or rather, society's survival rules for women. Here are some examples of famous slasher films that follow the final girl theory. The slasher films Psycho, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, Friday the 13th, Scream, and I Know What You Did Last Summer have all used the final girl trope to show how, or rather why, these girls survive the masked villain. All these final girls survive at the end because not only did they make logical choices throughout the film, but because they did not participate in lascivious behavior such as sex, drugs, and alcohol. Popular web blogger Mary Beth McAndrews and screenwriter and award-winning filmmaker John Finnegan both conclude that the final girl figure in the slasher film universe has been the perfect platform to express how gender politics reflects society's idea of what women should be like: virginal, responsible, resilient, and above all, exploitable. Because the final girl is so popular in the slasher film universe, the trope has now begun to bleed onto other film genres, like science fiction and action. But what makes this figure so recognizable and admired? The fact that this character is able to symbolize how women are portrayed in society. The slasher film allows, or rather calls, for the punishment of the characters who participated in lascivious behavior throughout the film, while it also spares the final girl from death, but not before punishing her with endless torment and suffering. Now that is what I call entertainment.